Shalom, peace. Welcome. All right, well, I guess the light's not catching me that much, but that's okay. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of mine heart be acceptable in your cup of sight. He is our strength and our redeemer, and it is in his name, which is his authority that we pray, praise, proclaim, project, and protect. Tonight's message, Aman. Hola, mi nombre es Kofi, ¿cómo está? Bonjour, je m'appelle Kofi, ça va? Iha, namaste, osaya de Kitsuya. Ohio, I see you, Manu, Tuguan, Kapsa, Kamsamida, Aloha, Chow, Oson, Abarigani, Aguaba, Madase, Itise, Jumbo, Mimi Kofi in the Frak Kukutan in the Way, Grand Risings, greetings, Barakala Chimney Hubba, Adai, Kobai, Kilita, to Christ, much like Hello, everybody. I am Pastor Kofi, Pastor Servant to Christ, where we are always changing lives one mind at a time, by being a voice of the voiceless and speaking the unspoken. It is dark. I don't really have great lighting at all here, and there is a little bit of background noise, not only the water that you can probably hear crashing up against the shore, but also the little bit of music in the background. There'll be some persons down in a little bit of a busy place, so forgive me. Prayerfully, I'll be loud enough. I can see on one platform I'm extremely blurry, probably because of lack of lighting and stuff on here, but I hopefully will be able to at least be heard well enough. Prayerfully you can hear me, even if you can't see me that well, hopefully you can hear me. I appreciate you all. As a reminder, tomorrow is going to be Q&A again. So if you have your questions, comments, or concerns, come with them ready for tomorrow. We shall be ready to address them as best as we can, as led by Hadash. Great questions, comments, and concerns, and everything that we had earlier today. So I'm very much appreciative of it. Is it John 3:15 that everyone who believes may have eternal life in him? Okay. Sure. Welcome, if that's your way of saying greetings. How you doing? So, or is that somebody different? Is that what's it? Hold on. That's not Lori Vargas, is it? Lord A. Vargas? No, Shurbaga, but probably not the same person that you said on here. But anyways, welcome everybody. We appreciate you. We're going to go ahead and get ready to say our Bible pledge real quick and jump right in. Thank you for being on with us. We appreciate you. If you don't mind keeping us in prayer, health, and just being able to be in one spot for a little bit. If you keep us in prayer as we try to rest some and everything that we continue to do what the Holy Spirit is leading us to as we get closer and closer to October 1st. Next Holy Day, Day of Atonement. Excited about that. Ministerial staff should have got their assignments, a brief video to discuss it, and I will try to contact you guys one-on-one in the mean and in between time. But anyways, we'll say our Bible pledge. We're going to jump into tonight. Tada. Atshalach. Thank you for your prayers. Thank you for your petitions. I appreciate it. I'm on. All righty, but let's go ahead and say welcome to everybody real quick, and then we're going to go ahead and jump right in for today's Real Talk. We're going to call this, I was starting to call this Night Start Live. Didn't really feel like it was doing anything better, but I like calling it, we're just going to call it Real Talk live sessions. In the evening, we kind of get it just nitty gritty. You know, even if we're doing Bible study, we kind of get into the nitty gritty, so we're going to do that. But let's go ahead and get into tonight. Welcome everybody once again. How you doing, Sister Judith? How you doing, Elder Anais? I'm Lord Evaga. Brother Alton. Let's see. Signs and Symbols. Big Brother Thomas. Deborah. Is it Natty Kayak or K? Natty K with two other Ks. Probably not meant that way. Shalom to you. How you doing? Everybody, and to my wife, Elder Alma, thanks for being on. The Honorable Alma, you can always check her out on TikTok, YouTube, website, and Pinterest at Bloom and Flourish. Not A&D, the letter N, Bloom and Flourish. She's a healer, herbalist, chemist, and biologist by degree. Oh, I get it now. Okay, Patty Cake. Okay, I'll try to recall that, remember that. All right, so, but let's just go ahead and get into today. If you'd like to go ahead and say your Bible pledge, you can just repeat after me. Thank you for those that are live with us, who will watch this later on, whatever the case might be. And if you don't mind, sharing this with others, let them know that we're on, that we're ready to go. They've been doing very, very great work at holding these things down and making it very difficult for persons to be able to check in with us. So, but those who watch this live and watch the recording later on, we appreciate you. Thank you for doing so. And hopefully this blesses you and your family and allows you to, be able to maybe look at some of the stuff that we're seeing through the lens that Yahweh really want us to look through and see what's going on. But we thank you all. We appreciate you. I think Sister Taylor came on. I think I saw that. Shalom, peace and blessings. All right, let's go ahead and get started. You can just put your right hand in the air. Just repeat after me. This is my Bible. This is my sword. In this will I trust. For Yahweh is Lord. No sword of God shall ever be heard. For this is my Bible. And this is Yah's word. Hashem Yahweh. Amen. Yahweh Shem, his name is authority. Let it be done unto us. You may be seated or go back to what you were doing in the presence of the Most High, Yahweh Elohim. Tonight, we're talking about freedom of speech. And thank y'all for the love. Thank you for any love, likes, subscriptions, hitting the notification tab, donations, yes, time, talent, effort, energy, and even those that do help with money for things that we're doing, what we're doing around the world. We appreciate you. You guys have been blessing SOC left and right. Families being taken care of, right? Bills being taken care of. Persons who thought they were going to get kicked out of their homes and stuff being taken care of, including even with just your prayers. I'm so proud to be affiliated with you all. You don't even comprehend, not just for the holy days, but for the holy work that you do. How you doing, Brother Rodney? All right, so let's go ahead and get into this for tonight. So we're going to talk about, once again, we are going to discuss freedom of speech. And I think I have in parentheses on one of the platforms, I believe I have in parentheses, Jimmy Kimmel conversation, kind of, right? Because we're kind of going to talk about Jimmy Kimmel, but for real, I think, sometimes, once again, we try to tell persons don't get so mixed up in this. Yahashua told us that there were going to be wars, rumors of wars, there were going to be persons who are fighting, saying they're doing stuff in the Messiah's name or his authority, all types of stuff. And he said, these are the beginning of sorrows. These things must happen, and you're going to have to build up endurance. In other words, you're going to have to build up a tolerance. You're going to have to be able to run the race, and the race is not given to the swift. You're going to be running for a while. How you doing, Brother Dwayne? And one of the things that gets you, and how you doing, Sister Carol, if I didn't say so already, Sister Beck as well, and Brother Alton, if I miss you, one of the things that we don't realize that we do and we need to rectify is we give way too much time to a lot of this stuff, right? Can I be honest? There's way too many brothers watching THPP Network and watching Cam Newton go back and forth with Gilly the Kid, and so many persons trying to be like Lil Wayne to where he says, do you, but then is so busy telling you that basically like he's the leader of the game anyways, he's the best out of everybody. There's so much confusion. There's so many persons who are listening and watching for soap opera. Now soap opera doesn't even have to be watched on television. Persons are paying a lot of money to get pieces of the soap opera so they can watch the whole thing. And then even past that, persons are now beginning to listen and watch stuff that a lot of times is not even real that's happened, right? And stuff like that, right? Some of us are watching so many sports, consuming so many sports now, not realizing that sports is nothing more than soap opera, right? But also here's another soap opera that persons don't really care to actually be honest about. We've been watching the United States Corporation, and you watch the news, and you watch CNN, and you watch all the affiliates, and you watch the different YouTube breakdowns, and you watch all these persons and you listen, and then we begin to put our own spin on the stuff. Not even saying it's always spin, just saying we put, our own 2 cents on it, sometimes not even researching because we're supposed to be separate, but we'll go ahead and say something because this, that, and we are spending so much time away from what Yahweh wants us to. You said it's a tragic comedy, right? Wagwan, Audrey, how you doing? All right, and thank y'all for the love. Appreciate you. How you doing, Brother Jermaine? How you doing, Sister Barbara? So, talking about, recently we talked about Charlie Kirk, right? And we were led to because it was such a thing, and it's going to be for a long time. But we had the conversation. We even let persons get it off their chest, including some persons at SOC. that made some takes and stuff that some of you may not know about. I'm not going to bring up because it's okay, you know, even for disagreements to arise, but as long as we're going to let the kingdom be the guide. Where there were some things that even, you know, persons who were SOC or SOC adjacent even were like saying, and it's like, oh, okay, because we're so politicized. If we're not careful, we'll forget who the king is, right? And the king is above all the foolish rhetoric, right? The king sits high and looks low, and he takes care of us because even though we might be low as far as in a specific position, as far as in comparison to him, he brings us up to higher heights and protects us, including from the foolish mindset of the world. And so I say all that, beloved, because now we got to have an honest dialogue. With the freedom of speech thing with Jimmy Kimmel, don't let them pull you into this weird situation and this weird thing, and now everybody was watching Jimmy Kimmel just to see what he did, and oh, Jimmy Kimmel teared up and this and that or whatever. Jimmy Kimmel, right, is part of the beast. He's part of the system. Jimmy Kimmel used to be up there. You guys remember? Maybe you don't. I'm young enough. I'm old enough. How about that? I'm old enough to remember, to recall there being a show called The Man Show. Y'all recall The Man Show? Right? What did Jimmy Kimmel do on The Man Show? Jimmy Kimmel had a whole different thing where they would go, was it every commercial, I think? They would go to commercial with girls on trampolines, and I'm using the language that they use, the colored language that they use, where the colorful, that's the way I'm supposed to say it, sorry, colored. The colorful language that they used to use, and they would go to commercial, they would have women jumping up, and they would say girls on trampolines, and they would have them dressed in all types of extremely provocative outfits, and they would make sure that you could see their so-called jugs, right? Maybe some of y'all don't recall that. I recall that show. It was called The Man Show. It was wild. It would be wild if they put it on today for sure with the Me Too movement, but back then, as everybody always tried to lie and tell you, it was a different time back then, and that's basically a person's excuses to be able to get out of a lot of foolishness that they've been doing. And it's a T or a tie, right? Left and right, but the left's a bit scary. Well, for real, the right is basically going to tell you exactly how much they hate you. The left is going to show you love and then bite you later, right? Either way, both are evil, right? And both will switch up on you. They'll switch for a season. Sometimes the right sounds like the left, and sometimes the left sounds like the right. And if you know how this stuff really works, don't forget the Republican Party used to be the left, and the Democratic Party used to be the right. So, in all these things, you need to consider the culture, right? You need to consider the culture. The Ballad of the Bullet is a great speech. It's a great speech given by Malcolm, if I'm not mistaken, right after they had bombed his home. Is that correct? And he had no clothes, or he had lost his clothes in the airport. I could have the wrong date and time for that, but it was close to the end. 64 or 65, I believe. That being said, yeah, you know, we have to get to a place where we recognize that there's a lot of foolishness, a lot of craziness, a lot of foolishness is going on, and we have to start to admit, right? We have to start to admit this. You remember that show? Yeah, it was crazy, right? How you doing, Sister Beverly? Praise God for you. All honor and praise given to the Most High, and we're thankful that He would allow us an opportunity to fellowship tonight. Thank you for being on, right? So, but you have this interesting dilemma that's happening where persons are acting like, now look, I get what the Constitution says. You guys know that here we love to talk about law, we love to talk about legalese, but we also believe that you should know what something really is, right? Like, for example, when the Constitution says we the people, the word people refers to a nation. And thank you for the love, man. And thank everybody for being on all platforms. So we the people means what? We the people is actually speaking specifically about a nation. Now you have to ask yourself, when the Constitution or when the Declaration of Independence is written, are you considered, if you were a Negro or a woman, by the way, a woman would at least be treated, now a woman would at least be treated like a person, but technically, she definitely didn't have any rights. But if you were a person of color, the savage, as they call us, the Native American, or the so-called slave or bondman, right? Did you have any right? You got to ask yourself that, right? Like, did you actually have any rights. When you hear a person say that, right, you have to be very alert to things when you talk about law, when you talk about the Constitution. When you talk about law, you have to be very aware of how things operate, right? So we the people means we the nation, right? Were you considered to be part of the nation? We would tell you, of course, no. If you had to wait until an amendment way later on after your so-called country was created for you to be able to vote, you probably weren't really a person, and you didn't, you might have been treated better than some persons, but you didn't have rights, certain rights. If many places you couldn't have your own checking account, although there were some places to where obviously women had not only that but land and things like that, but state by state you had different laws, things that we would say are extremely, even the worst so-called red pillars would admit to you like, oh yeah, like I don't think that women shouldn't have bank accounts, right? But that's how far that was right back then, right? So we know that language has changed, right? So I want to go to this thing of free speech, because part of the problem is, once again, you have to be in the system but not of it. And if you're not of something and you can step back to look at it long enough, what you discover is you start having certain things happen in the way that you think that allow for you to see things from a different perspective, right? One of the things that helps me out, I know persons are supposed to admit this because pastors are supposed to have these problems, even though, wink, wink, all of us do. We're human beings. That being said, if my wife and I are disagreeing and we're having a little bit of an argument, one of the things that I try to do on a regular basis, not always successful, but I try, is to literally be like, if I wasn't in the argument and I was listening to both of us argue, what would I say if I was coaching you through that, right? Then I don't empathize with one side, empathize with the other, but see the whole thing. Because the truth, honestly, is usually in between your side and their side. It's usually somewhere in the middle, right? So I try to put those things together. So when you have the ability to pull yourself out of it, we're in the system from time to time, but we're in the system, but we're not what? We're not of it. We're not signed up for it. We're not doing all the stuff with it that everybody else does. How you doing, Russell? So when you step back from the situation, you would discover that freedom of speech has never really existed, right, in the United States corporation, right? It has existed for those who have power, but even still, they can lose it because you're dealing with capitalism and you're dealing with chattel slavery. That's what the United States corporation is based off of. How you doing, Tahiti, sweetie? So I want to help you out because we can easily say that freedom of speech is real, right? If you want to start, I know he's not the first president, but I just go ahead and meet persons halfway on this, because a lot of persons aren't going to do the research and just think that I'm a crazy person when I say this. So George Washington, let's just assume he's your first president. He's not. He by his own acknowledgement, acknowledges two presidents that came before him that he says are his favorite. Nevertheless, let's just play this game. George Washington is the first president, right? How much percentage did George Washington win the vote by? When George Washington ran for president, who ran against him, and how much percentage of the vote did he get? We want to talk about freedom of speech. We're just going to start at the beginning. Freedom of speech. Freedom of speech. George Washington, your so-called first president, got how much percentage of the vote? Come on. And we're going to keep it up just that, Brother Dwayne. Exactly. He got 100%. If he got 100% of the vote, women weren't allowed to vote. Only 6% of the country was allowed to vote. And even out of that, they whittled it down to make sure that those who were going to vote were only going to vote for him, and those that were afraid or who might keep it from being 100 were afraid. How much freedom of speech do you think they had? If he got 100% of the vote. I'm going to say it again. If George Washington got 100% of the vote, how much say-so do you think the people had? I know. Somebody might say I'm tripping off that one. No problem. Let's go to another one. You ready? The second president of the United States, right, after George Washington filled 2 terms, and by the way, he wasn't just some really nice guy that just went home. George Washington went home because he didn't like the fact that people didn't like what he did during his second term, which, by the way, is normal. Most presidents are not liked during their second term, right? Because persons will usually look over the stuff at the beginning, swearing that, okay, this time they're going to do it, and then they realize during the second term, oh, you're not keeping your word, you're on some stuff. What'd you say? You said correct you if you're wrong. You don't even think anyone ran against him. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Now, if somebody did run against him, it was like a puppet, right, to make it appear. But basically, either way, nobody really ran against him. But I don't even think they had officially had somebody. I think they had handpicked him, or he had handpicked himself, depending on how much of the stuff you believe behind the scenes with the 33rd degree Mason. He might not have literally handpicked himself, but we know that everybody was like, hey, everybody will bow down to him because he's supposed to be the hero, da-da-da-da. Right? But that's the first president, so-called first president. The second president is who? John Adams, right? Not John Quincy. John Quincy is his son, the sixth president, John Adams. And John Adams was also part of the Federalist Party, the same party that George Washington was. He was the vice president of George Washington. And when he became president, guess what John Adams lost his popularity in, or because of? I just want to help you with something, because if we're not careful, we're going to be arguing some stuff that's not even true. Freedom of speech, blah, blah. There's never truly been freedom of speech. The illusion of freedom is what gets you caught up. You have to be able to be free enough to where you're not dependent on the capital out of this capitalist society, right? So that you're not still in chains to where you can't speak your mind, right? Yeah, that second term curse, how you doing, Daniel? Right? But the second president, John Adams, guess what got him in trouble? What got him in trouble was that he started going around and using his position along with some Congress members. They started basically shutting up and locking up and even kicking people out of the country, anybody who would speak a bad word about him. That's why he didn't even, I don't know if he even ran a second term. He probably did. Matter of fact, he did. Him and Thomas Jefferson ran against each other the first time, and then Thomas Jefferson won the second time that he ran against him. They hated each other. If you go and even look at their campaigns, it's actually one of the ugliest campaigns, one of the ugliest campaigns ever run by both sides going at each other. It's historical. It's one of, if you want to study, you think persons say bad things about each other now. Go back to then. John Adams and Thomas Jefferson considered to be one of the craziest things that you've ever seen going back and forth. Historic precedents set here for how persons will start to go at each other and talk trash about each other and do all this, right? But John Adams basically lost any kind of popularity that he had because they started locking persons up if you spoke something bad. Teddy Roosevelt. I'm skipping around a little bit with these presidents, but I like to deal with the presidents because the presidents set precedent. Teddy Roosevelt. Do you think Teddy Roosevelt was into free speech? When Teddy Roosevelt helped to make sure that a poem about the white man's burden written by Rudyard Kipling was allowed to go through? Where Teddy Roosevelt making the point to have the Great White Fleet go around the earth? You think he was about making sure everybody was being heard? Abraham Lincoln said, if he could keep the country together and free no slaves, he would. If he could free all the slaves, he would. If he would keep some slaves and free others, he would. In other words, he didn't care about your rights. He was trying to make sure he preserved the union. He even said that he didn't think, and this is wild because he's part native, part black, and part so-called white, right? But this is what he said. He said he didn't even believe this one before he was even running. 2 years before he even runs, or about a year and a half before he even runs for president, officially, everybody knows he's going to run and person think he's probably going to win. And he makes a point to write letters out to persons in advance to keep the country together and saying, hey, please don't believe the hype. I'm not coming in here to let black persons get this. I think that black persons are on the bottom of the so-called totem pole. We know the totem pole at the bottom is actually the strongest or the best or the first. That being said, he was like, I think they're really on the bottom of the totem pole. These black folk, they don't really know what they're talking about. They're stupid, they're dumb, they're slow. I'm not coming here to try and free them. And then the only reason he did the 40 acres and the mule thing was because he wanted to break the South, and those who betrayed the Union, he wanted to make an example out of. Right? Him becoming a martyr, right? Him, in essence, becoming the Charlie Kirk of his time. He gets a get out of jail free card. But he didn't really care about us. He didn't care about you. He didn't care about himself. He didn't like himself. Married a woman, and one of the reasons why he married his wife, because she had slaves. Only a couple, though. Only a couple. You know, he wasn't that bad. He only had a couple slaves, right? Yeah, exactly. As long as it supports supremacy of so-called white persons, right? So with all the stuff that we're speaking on, I need you to comprehend, like, freedom of speech is an illusion. If there was true freedom of speech, then why is it that Kyrie Irving, right, they tried to stop Kyrie Irving from playing basketball because he came out and said he doesn't want to get the jab. And then also, he simply put out a book that you could have wrote for yourself, and persons, I could tell, didn't read the book. Very well written book, right? But he just simply put a book out. He didn't say, he just put a link on, back then called Twitter, right? That's all he did. And he said, and the book basically shows you who the Israelites are. You can look it up, you can research it, you can cross-reference it with other books, not just modern books, which I try to get you on. You can look at books written in the 1300s, the 1500s, the 1100s. You can look at books written in the first century, etc., to be able to see if what these things are saying are so. But freedom of speech is so great for you that Kyrie Irving, because, you know, persons say the more money you have, the more freedom of speech you have, you know, but that doesn't seem to be the case. LeBron James, when it get upset the apple cart, they sprayed the N-word on the side of his house. And LeBron James don't just live anywhere. You got to be able to afford to get to LeBron James' house. Spray painted the N-word right on the wall, or was it the gate, something like that, just to make sure he understood who you are in this society and what your speech will get you. If freedom of speech, and I'll acknowledge it even for persons that we don't agree with, if freedom of speech was all right in this country, then somebody should be able to come out and say how they feel. How you feel gets you in trouble. See, this country is not based off of freedom of speech. If freedom of speech is real, then also, too, that if somebody speaks something and they're teaching you something that can show you the truth, you shouldn't get kicked off. You know, we shouldn't have our numbers suppressed because we tell the truth. Freedom of speech is a fallacy. Just like you believing that this country is not a corporation, it's a fallacy, it's lunacy. You don't think it's lunacy because somebody's been telling you, no, it's real. But the reality is, it's a lie. And I see you on Gundam, sorry, and how you doing, Sister Kimberly? How you doing, Kimberly? Thanks for being part of the community, Kimberly, right? And Sister Kimberly, you are part of the community, right? These are things that we don't want to have honest dialogue about, honest conversation. How you doing, Sister Tamika? How you doing, Sister Dawn? Right? We don't want to have honest conversation. There's never truly been freedom of speech. Some things are allowed, some things aren't. You know, even the speech, ain't I a woman? And I even read the one that, we're used to hearing, but it wasn't even ain't I a woman. That's not even really the name of the speech. What Sojourner Truth wrote, somebody came and drafted that differently, right? So it would be more special, and they wanted you to think, see, she's talking about her as far as, she's talking about her blackness, but she's really there for all women. Just like they tried to play you with Harriet Tubman and be like, yeah, Harriet Tubman did give a bunch of speeches and stuff for sure, right? But they're like, yeah, Harriet Tubman, she was out there, and all the women, and Susan B. Anthony was asked, would you fight for black men to be able to vote? And she said that she would rather give her right arm, because I believe she was right-handed. I think that's why she said her right arm. But she said she'd rather give her right arm than to help us out. And when Sojourner Truth in the 1850s was trying to come over and support women, not black women, women, right, in their Me Too movement of their day, she was told to stay her black behind home because the so-called white women thought that her fight and their fight were two different fights. In other words, you're not on our level, we're not fighting for you, we're fighting for us. Right? Same Susan B. Anthony that said she wouldn't fight for black men to vote. All of a sudden now she wants Harriet Tubman. No, they took Harriet Tubman in because it makes them seem great. So they'll let Harriet Tubman speak on our behalf as long as they can find a way to finesse it and say, see, we're all in this together, or we're supporting them too. When the reality is they don't care about all. They care about what gets them what they want. And if it means that you'll help them, propel them enough to where they'll be heard, and then after that they'll go ahead and treat you like you didn't say anything, so be it. And because we're so stuck on the system, we think that we have to be in this system, and we think that this system better give us freedom of speech. You have not even been free enough to be private. How you think they're gonna let your speech be private? How you doing, Mom? Always. Yeah, we gotta have some truthful and honest questions. They, how's your speech gonna be private and you're not even private? How you gonna have freedom from the beach, from the government, and you're not even free from the government? Come on, somebody. Come on. I'm not trying to get on you, not trying to make anybody upset. Just honest conversation, honest dialogue, honest question. How you doing, Toya? And thank y'all for the love, right? Honest question. You're under the illusion that you have the freedom to speak in this system, right? You're under the illusion. It's so interesting. Everybody goes, you know what's going on with Hitler. I mean, sorry, you're going on with Trump, and Trump is doing the same stuff. Study what happened with Hitler, and you can see some stuff that's for sure. But I'm like, why are you going back to Hitler? Study what happened with Eisenhower. You remember when he shut it up, where people couldn't speak their mind? Maybe you need to study Eisenhower. You know? Go back to Roosevelt, who wanted you to think that he wanted women to speak up, and had his wife, Eleanor, out there. And Eleanor was in shambles because when her husband passed away, he was cheating on her. He died in his mistress' arms and not hers. But he had respect for women, and he wanted them to have freedom of speech. And he wanted them to be treated correctly until, wait a minute, all of a sudden he did. How you doing, well, Mom? Right? He said Mussolini is where they got Make America Great Again from. But even with that, you got to go back to even Ronald Reagan, right? Even before we go back to Mussolini, go back to Ronald Reagan. If you don't like Reaganomics, Ronald Reagan ran on Make America Great Again. And guess where he got it from? And guess how he supported Nixon and talked about how persons of color, especially African persons, are persons who are too backwards, dumb, slow, and we can't even, to even have shoes on our feet. But you, in your mind, you think that they want freedom and justice and equality for all. Okay. That's where you are. Right? I'm just saying. And all this stuff that you're going to hear a person tell you and try to get you to connect with and try and get you to go ahead and say it's happening and things like that. Freedom of speech is not real, not in this country. Never has been. The only freedom comes in Christ. Only true freedom. And you're going to have to get rid of this system, or at least get out of this system. That's right. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said it's a crazy thing when they tell us to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and we have no boots. Right? And they're telling you to speak your mind, but you have no freedom of speech. If you had freedom of speech, if you had true freedom of speech, if you had true freedom, well, the corporations run different, the private sector runs different. I'm going to be very careful with this. But that being said, if you had true freedom of speech, watch this. Why is it that the same things that you've been saying only just now have been acknowledged? Because a rich white person on television became the second rich white man to have his voice cut off. And certain persons started saying, wait a minute, if they'll do it to him, they can do it to us. Yeah, you forgot. That's what so-called white person, right? That's what happened. Tell me a lie. Stephen Colbert. Everybody was going to let that one go. And we were just sad that he was being kicked off. All of a sudden happens to Jimmy Kimmel. And right, just as blatant as the first one. And now a person started paying attention. And what did even Republicans say? I'm not a Republican or a Democrat, by the way. I'm just making it a point to show you. What did even the Republicans start saying? Even persons like Ted Cruz came out there and said, man, this dude acting like a mafioso boss out here on behalf of Trump. And they're afraid. And they didn't say it's going to be something that affects the whole community or all of us need to be protected. That's not what they even said. They said if we allow, the FCC to do what they did to Colbert and to Kimmel, then they said it will be bad down the line for Republicans. Right? That's what they did. They said if they're doing it to them, then what happens if the Democrats get in office and they do it to us? Once it became something that they could empathize with, not because they cared about the person, but because their empathy was really them sympathizing with themselves. Shalom, Sister Tia, how you doing? Right? When they could empathize, see, When it became, oh, this could be something that hurts me. This could be something that if I'm giving a speech, somebody could use against me. This is something if we have comedians, like they might come after Joe Rogan next. All of a sudden, Joe Rogan and who's the dude where Kendrick made the verse, don't let no white comedian speak against no black woman. That's law or whatever. When he was talking bad, who was that was talking about black woman in front of the S and Gigs people? Whatever his name, Andrew something. That guy, that comedian who always has all these persons of color to back him up so he can keep saying trash, right? So once the rich people, we the people, how you doing, Pastor Houston? Once the rich folk, Andrew Schultz, thanks, baby. Once the rich folk were in trouble, oh man, bring Jimmy Kimmel back, right? Once the rich folk we're like, man, they messing with the money now. They coming after our money. They gonna get rid of us and they put their boys in place. And we can't have that because that means we don't have money. Okay, now we gotta push back. It's not because of protecting you or protecting your freedom. It's if your freedom is the same as theirs. At least the ones that they're messing with. See, watch this. I need you to comprehend. They didn't strike a blow for freedom of speech. They struck a blow for their freedom to say what they want. Right? Because right now, on social media, a whole bunch of us who've been saying the same thing about freedom of speech and loving our neighbor and being what y'all tells us to be, etc., we're constantly and consistently being suppressed. So I don't know what freedom of speech y'all talking about. This is not a freedom of speech thing. Right, men being lovers of themselves. 1 Timothy chapter 3. So freedom of speech is it's written, it's constitutional, but don't forget, the Constitution is not written for you. And thanks for being over here again, Lauren. Thanks for finding us, right? And thank you for the love. Thanks, babe. Right? Thank you, everybody, for being on all different platforms today. I'm sorry, Callum. Shalom to you, by the way, if I didn't say so already. So you have to take this with a grain of salt, this whole thing where persons are trying to get you to mobilize and we got to go against those who speak against freedom of speech. There is no such thing as true freedom of speech in a system that's designed off of making sure that only one perspective lives. It's always been. See, watch this. Even when you fight for your so-called freedom, I don't want to make it as elementary as black versus white. However, sometimes it's easier to describe it because a lot of us are still living in the fallacy and the lunacy of colonial and social constructs, right? So allow me to just go ahead and make it black versus white, just for a second, okay? I know it's not as simple as that. I know there's gray area. I know there's different levels, etc. Just if you would humor me for a bit, especially those of you who know my heart and know our belief system here, if you would just allow me, just for a second. How you doing, Brother Omar? Right? Shalom to you. Peace, peace, peace. All right. So here we go, beloved. All right, you ready? You ready, beloved? Here we go. If we make it as simple as black versus white, like I said, it's more complicated, but let's just do it like this. This system is supposed to make sure that those who are so-called black, and black means one drop rule, so you'll qualify it, all right? If they find out you're black, you're gonna have problems. What about that system makes you believe that freedom of speech was for everybody? You know something that's interesting about freedom of speech? You live in a place that says it's okay to tell persons that there's something called black fatigue. Right? Hear this, beloved. You live in a place where it's okay to say that persons have black fatigue. However, you're not allowed in the same place to really say that persons can be anti-black. Persons can have black fatigue. And by the way, this is all social construct, colonial constructs anyways, right? We should be past this, but a lot of you are still stuck on Republican, Democrat, black, white, all this. That's why I have to come at it this way. Because a lot of persons don't want to be honest and just be like, hey, if we were to actually love one another the way we're supposed to, a lot of this foolishness has to be tossed out. The only reason why you're fighting or having so-called black fatigue is because you can't empathize. The only reason why you say all white persons now have to be evil the way that they said we were is because you can't empathize. That's the reason. If you were able to come out of that, you would come out of a lot of foolishness, right? Right, but the world, the system, that's what the word world means even in your Bible, right? When it says, for Elohim so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that word world there is cosmos in the Greek with a K, it means system, right? So you're dealing with a system that's been put in place that really messes with persons and causes us not to live, be with each other and to live righteously, right? So all those different things that we're doing, right? But going back to what I was talking about, the black experience, so-called black experience, especially with the one-drop rule, is a situation where anybody who is black in any way or supports black in any way, you're not allowed to say anti-black, but you're always allowed to say, nowadays especially, right, it's a newish kind of thing, that there's black fatigue. Now somebody says, what's the big deal about that? If you can say that there's black fatigue, but can't call somebody anti-black, right? Because it's interesting, you can say somebody's anti-white, you can say somebody's anti-Jewish, but you can't say somebody's anti-black without being knocked around, virtually, sometimes physically, right? And that should be something that helps you to see where we are as far as person talking about freedom of speech. We were talking about Hitler earlier. You know what's interesting about Hitler? At first, when they found out it was 2 million Jews, and then they started saying, 6 million, some person tried to bring it up to 10 million, and for real, there was that much genocide, but it was not all Jewish genocide, right? But that being said, if they want to say it's 6 million, they want to say it's 10 million, I'm not even going to argue that tonight, right? But nobody would ever say the Jewish person who stands up for his freedom and says that he deserves some kind of reparations and all this, nobody would ever say to that person that they're evil or that they're wrong. Matter of fact, we have been trained specifically, right? And even in the worst places, in the places where they mistreated them, like Germany, Austria-Hungary, France, Prague, right? All these different places where they really mistreated the Jewish folk, right? They made it a point to try and right those wrongs and try to teach, hey, bare minimum. If they're talking about what they want or what they need or whatever, like, listen to them, bare minimum. Hear them. Don't just jump in, correct? But if you or I say we're a Jew, not Jewish, we're Jew, we're supposed to shut up. How dare you? I have black fatigue. Right? You got to see what's going on. You keep talking about freedom of speech. This is why you got to disconnect from the system. Why do you think that your speech is something that they're going to lift up? If your speech has been, if every time righteous speech, if it's John Brown's speeches, they try to make him look crazy. Tim Wise, his speeches, great speaker, they try to make him look crazy. Right? Person such as who had change of heart in the way that he even treated us, like sports broadcaster, Howard Cosell, in the way that he was instrumental in helping Muhammad Ali in the toughest times of his life as far as promoting him in the public and stuff like that. He started getting hits, taking a hit publicly, because persons were like, why would you go against that traitor to the country? Because Muhammad Ali, and I'm just quoting here, forgive my language, I'm quoting, Muhammad Ali made a point to say, no Viet Cong ever called me nigger. Salah. Right? But so it's not even that. If anybody says anything about us and saying that they have black fatigue, they're tired of it. And they've been tired of it. They've been telling us for time. So they used to see what used to be able to happen was because of the way stuff was in the corporations and the way their money was set. That's what happens with the corporations about money, right? The corpse, those who are really dead in the heart and really aren't true human beings and are artificial versions of themselves and want you to treat yourself like an artificial person. The corporation, the thing that's dead, the dead system, artificial system that has no life, right? Has no works that go properly with the faith that we should have, therefore they have no life. This corporation is built upon making sure that so-called black persons are at the bottom, right? The darker they get, the further down they are, and that the lighter you get, the better you should be treated. Black women, most educated, DEI stuff, AA stuff as far as, well, y'all know, there's different types of AA. I'm not talking about Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm talking about, them letting us get jobs and stuff like that. All of a sudden, DEI, all this stuff becomes popularized. The last, 15 to 20 years have been against AA and DEI and stuff like that. Now, all of a sudden, the women who work their butt off, as far as percentage, the most, are the women who got kicked out and are the ones who are losing their jobs at the most. And guess who's been trained to go against them and laugh at them more than anybody else? The so-called black man. And if we raise our voice and say, in this time of need, our women need to be protected, I got black fatigue. I'm tired of hearing about this. There's sisters at SOC. We've been helping left and right. We've been asking persons, when you guys been raising stuff for family, a lot of sisters, when they got kicked off, it hit us too. Praise y'all for the majority of it seemed like, but I don't even know if it's the majority. It seemed like it was all of a sudden like half the sisters at SOC talking about losing their job, or having to start a whole new careers, having to move, or doing all this stuff at the same time. And, because we're so stuck in the world of use, things of that nature, that's where a lot of us were getting our stuff from. So prayerfully, we kind of come out of that to where we're not so focused on those things, those items, and looking at things, and they have to go that way. Hola, mi hermana, ¿cómo están? Gracias por tu presencia siempre. Right? Right? This is, and the Sister Sherry, right? This is, we have to be honest. If we speak up, black fatigue, right? But don't you dare say that the person who has black fatigue against you automatically, that's your first place to go to. Don't you dare say that that person is anti-black, so-called anti-black. Don't you dare say it. It's like when people talk about the law. Yehoshua is the word is also the law. So he is the law. If you're against the law, you're anti-Christ. Don't you dare say that. I'm against the law, but I'm not against the Christ. Well, the Christ is the word. The Christ is the law. But that's old law. When he came to get rid of the law. But how does he get rid of himself? And he said, I came not to destroy the law or the prophets. I came not to destroy. I came that these things might be put into effect, and what you call fulfilled. Right? The same way that some persons have ears, but they cannot hear, eyes, and they cannot see. You're seeing the same thing happen to where persons, you can show them, you can see, but they are so stuck. And watch this. This is one of the reasons why you need to become sovereign or private, or become a king under the king, or a lord under the Lord as soon as possible, beloved. Because here you are in a situation where if you continue to be in this world, you have to start to think like the world the longer you're in it. See, we might be in the world, but hopefully that's every once in a while. The goal is to be in the world as little as possible. But if you're always in it, and always having to do everything of it, at some point you have to start thinking like the world. You're sitting here thinking like the world. I ain't doing both, sir. Right? Right? It's kingdom sense, that's right, not common sense. Persons are still thinking like the system, like the beast. So much so that you think that the beast wants you to be free. What does your Bible say about freedom? Read your Bible, it'll bless you. What's in there? Let it barak you, right? Let savar barak, right? What does your word say? How you doing, Sister Shirley? What does the word say about freedom? The beast is what's governing you, right? If it's anything outside the kingdom, the beast is what governs. All right? But the question that we're in now, right? Right? The question that we're in now, what does the Bible say about freedom? What causes one to be free? What will create freedom, or make freedom, or set you up for freedom? That is it possible to work while having checked non-citizenship? Yes, it is, right? You have to, once again, you have to make sure, and you don't check it anymore on your passport stuff or whatever. They don't have it set up like that. You have to know how to fill out the DS-11 form, right? If you'd like to be able to talk about that, or have me send you a link or something that will explain it, feel free. to let me know, right? But the truth shall set you free, or the truth shall make you free. Amat, Alav, Mam, Tav, or Aleph, Mem, Tav, meaning what? The source, where you're getting it from, the Father, the source, the womb, the water, blood, and spirit, three in one, right? So the source who created you is three in one, and Tav, the one who was on the Tav, he is the truth. He's the way, the truth, and life. He is the word. This is why it's very interesting that the word says, follow the law. Everybody else says, I don't follow it. But if you'd like me to, once again, if you can, look on the link tree. See if you can look on the link tree for me. Just text me at the 202 number as a reminder, please. Right? But we're missing this. Right? We're missing these things. Right? That you're so busy looking at freedom of speech, and in the system, in the beast system, you're not supposed to be free. You need to learn legalese, and that's because they lie to you about this stuff, because they have to at least tell you some truth. Because every lie is based off of truth. But we're not even taught things about UCC, Uniform Commercial Code, USC, United States Code. If you knew some of those things, you would know how to sign paperwork to make sure that you can't be held responsible for something that goes against it violates your human rights. Even if you signed it, even if you didn't know, or if somebody put you in a position where you felt like you were forced to, you can sign the same thing every time. Those of you who know about UCC 1-308, in parentheses, under duress, or in parentheses, without prejudice, boom. But we haven't been taught the basics. Why? Because why would they teach you how to protect yourself if the goal is to make sure that you live as an artificial person, and to make sure that they take as much freedom as they can? Now, they do it under the guise of, you're in the United States. This is one of the most free places. This is something that I heard from some persons I really respect. Something that I heard over and over again. The narrative is being built up to say, this is something, them taking away your freedom of speech, is something that can happen anywhere in the world, but it shouldn't happen here. And I'm like, you think that slaves had freedom of speech? You think in prisons they had freedom of speech? Somebody might say, well, in prison you lost your right. I don't know if you lost your right to speak. Probably shouldn't lose that. But we don't care when somebody goes to prison. We don't really care about somebody repairing their image, repairing themselves, coming out of it. You know, you let them throw them in complete darkness, for 30, 40 days, and they care less, right? They deserve it. Right, that deals with forgiveness. One day we'll get to a point, because nobody's going to change the prison system until you actually believe, number one, that everybody should be treated like non-slaves, and number two, if you are putting somebody in that position, they're still a human being. Right? How you doing, Thomas Giovanni? Right? So it's the truth that creates freedom. And if you can't, but a lot of persons can't tell the truth. We can't have an honest dialogue. For a lot of persons, if I were to say to them, hey, you know what, racism exists, immediately they're upset, and they're telling me I'm a reverse racist. You know why they do that? They have black fatigue, because they don't like anybody to say that there's something that could be so-called anti-black. Do you have the freedom? Watch this. Do you have true freedom? I'm talking about freedom of speech. Can your child go to school and pray? Watch out now. That's not a trick question. Can your child go to school and pray? Freedom of speech, though. Now somebody says, well, school, it's got to be for everybody, no beliefs. No, okay, everybody can pray. Matter of fact, there are children that can go to schools, even in places that you wouldn't think, like the Commonwealth of Virginia, and go to schools and literally get pamphlets and stuff about devil worship, but can't pray against devil worship. Right? I'm going to say it one more again. Right? You can go to schools and they can put devil worship pamphlets down for your child to have. And not all, but some of the guys that you see reading those books, you remember it was a big deal. They still do it a lot, but it was like a really big deal for a few years, where they were having a whole bunch of, there's a political term, transsexuals, that were coming to the schools, and there were guys that were dressing like women, but not only dressing like women, they had horns and everything attached to their heads and all that, and putting the makeup to where they looked like they were evil. They weren't even wearing drawers sometimes. I didn't say all the time, but there were definitely cases, not more, not one, not two, not three. There were enough cases where it started making persons' antennas raised up, and they were showing up to the schools and they were doing readings and stuff for the children. And when parents said, not Kofi, because my son's not in no school, right? He's homeschooled. But when the parents, when they saw that it was not righteous, right? When they saw what it wasn't righteous, even if they didn't believe what we believe, they said, why are children seeing grown men, right, dressed like demons, reading books, with no underwear? And the world, the system, right, got upset at the parents. Yeah, that's why all of us should speak up, but we should speak out righteously and speak as one voice, right? But they got mad at the parents, if you recall. And some of this happened somewhat recently, to where you saw even on the social medias of today that are the most popular. You saw persons coming out here and making sure they're defending it. Look, bro, don't ever in your life think that it's okay to come across little children and be uncrossing your legs and recrossing your legs and you're not wearing no drawers. Right? This is the same, I'm trying to show you. Like, you're talking about freedom of speech, but you don't have the freedom, or at least you have not put yourself in a place to ensure that you know the law enough to make sure that you put these freedoms together, right? Do you guys recall there was a little boy? I believe, I could be wrong about this, I don't remember when he started. I'm gonna say the age, because I think it's the younger age that rhymes with the number I'm about to say, but I could be wrong. So let me just to make sure that I'm correct in this. There was a little boy who wanted to strip, right? He wanted to strip like he saw gay strippers do. I believe he could have been younger, but I'm gonna say this number just to be safe. He was 11, right? And he came on, I don't know which one, NBC, ABC, something like that. The one that had the former lineman for the New York Giants, Michael Strahan, whatever his name is, right? But they showed how his parents, didn't know what to do, and so they went sought help and asked persons what they should do, and they didn't want to, deal with religious zealots who might say, no, not only should he not be stripping this little boy, but he probably should act like a little boy. Somebody said they went to somebody else in the world, and the world, the person who talked to the child and then talked to them said, hey, let him strip. Why not take him to the strip club? Why not take him to the gay strip club? Or the gay bar, or whatever it was. And so they took their son. At least once a week, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know, it could have been nightly, but I think it was like at least once a week they would take their son, right? 11-year-old, underage, to a place where grown men were in there, and they would let their son strip. And then they brought him on television for the world to see. And then Michael Strahan, everybody was sitting up there clapping. Why this little boy is stripping? Come on, Lord, we're going to speak the truth, right? And talk about what fruit to look for when these people are doing whatever, right? So what I'm saying is that's what they did, 11. Everybody, now, if you bring this up, people will try to go to a place of trying to act like, but see, we should really, if we really want, when they be putting out all these other persons and stuff and trumping everybody, be careful what's in your closet. See, some of y'all, if we were to rewind the tape, so to speak, we would see you were the biggest supporter because you were so democratic that you couldn't see, wait a minute, there's a little boy being put in front of grown men. If it was a little girl, it'd be bad. If it was a little boy being put in front of women, it would be bad. Don't matter. They put the boy out there, and now what happens to that little boy for the rest of his life? What's the mindset? What kind of parenting is that? What kind of society is that? Community is that? That's right, they offer the little boy up. We'll do what the Holy Spirit says do. Right? Yeah, you remember that story? Yeah. So what I'm saying is if you had came out and said, that's wrong, why is it that if you have freedom of speech, somebody said, well, you have your right to believe that? And why is it that they tried to deaden that? And now you can't really find too many persons talking about it. But if they did it with that child, do you think that they're still doing it? All right, freedom of speech. You ready? Charlie Kirk. On the same day that Charlie Kirk was shot, freedom of speech. Why is it that when Charlie Kirk was shot on that day, and he was murdered, I already told you, we've talked about how we feel about that. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole and everything again, right? That being said, same day that Charlie Kirk died, why is it that they blocked the news from you guys to show you that in Utah, right? Basically like a couple hours before, there was already a shooting in Utah, in a school, where if I'm not mistaken, at least 3 persons, now I don't know if they were mortally, I think they were mortally wounded, and others might have been injured, but I could be wrong on that. Maybe it was just that 3 persons were hurt or something like that, but there was a school shooter. Same place Charlie Kirk was. Not at the college, but I'm just saying same state. Let's just say same state to be safe. Why is it that nobody said anything, and why is it that the governor of Utah was crying for talking about 33 hours later, he was praying that it wasn't somebody that looked like him that shot Charlie? And by the way, you know, when they caught the guy, right, when they came to his house, and they caught up with him, or whatever they found him, and they found him, guess why they treated the guy who shot Mr. Kirk? Guess why they treated him with respect? They treated him with respect because his father's a cop. You know, how like they'll say that it's okay to put your knee on George Floyd's neck. Meanwhile, they're out here, you know, putting up raffles together for somebody who killed Trayvon. I don't even feel like saying his name tonight. I will though. Mr. George Zimmerman. Right? I don't want to say it, but BOBD. Right? Respect somebody's humanity, even if they can't respect you. Right? When we see all those different things, we have to realize and recognize very quickly that we're in a position where we're not, you know, persons aren't really being, we're so busy talking about freedom of speech, but you can't even say when you see something wrong. If you can't say when you see something wrong, there is no freedom of speech. The person who helps to draft, you know, the person that gets the most credit for it, even though he's not the only person that worked on it, but Thomas Jefferson, who helps to draft, you know, Declaration of Independence. While he's talking about freedom, he wasn't talking about for you. He had 5,000 acres, thousands of slaves in his lifetime. His father, slave owner. His father was sitting up there listening to Willie Lynch when Willie Lynch came to town and gave the speech on Christmas Day of 1712. Why would you think that they want you and I to be free? What makes you think that we ever had freedom of speech? If a person comes out today and says the Bible says women should be treated with respect and this is how it should be done and Trump is wrong, will they make sure that that person's freedom is uplifted? Or will Trump and them say FCC? And not just Trump, anybody. By the way, quiet as kept. Biden tried to do stuff with the FCC to squash before, and so did Obama, and so did Clinton, right? Quiet as kept. Everybody's talking about Bill Clinton, this and that, or whatever, and we were so crazed, right? Because we lack so much attention. We were like, oh, Clinton loves us because this is why we say Clinton. Remember, the D.L. Hughley's, they got the braids and stuff together now, right? But remember, back in the day, he used to say that there was never going to be a black president. Clinton was the closest we were going to get. Persons like Dave Chappelle said the same thing, that Clinton was going to be the closest we ever got. And why did they say that? They said because he was a weed-smoking fornicator. And that was something that they could identify with. So even if he was lying, he got caught cheating on his wife. Hey man, that's black stuff. That's what they said. That's what they taught. Now, we throw that stuff to the side and act like nobody ever said it, but that's what was taught. There's more freedom. That stuff sells. There's more freedom for that. But if you were to say, you know, honor the Most High. Do you really have freedom to say that? Right? Freedom of speech in the United States Corporation is an illusion. It's always been, it always will be. It was never designed to be anything else. Even with the Electoral College, when they created the Electoral College, they told you straight up that the Electoral College was not created for you. The Electoral College was created to protect whoever they wanted to be in office. They stood by it. They were 10 toes down and they told you the truth about it. And yet, for some reason, we're still trying to figure out how to make it something that is not. Right? At some point, we're going to be honest. So just wanted to put that out there. It was led by Holy Spirit. I'm finished. But just wanted to make it a point to say we're not here to I'm not here to tell you that you shouldn't ever look at the law, legalese, constitution, whatever. What I'm here to tell you is don't get so caught up on this thing, right, that you forget that the kingdom of heaven comes before all this anyways, right? Matthew chapter 6, verse 33, after it tells us don't be worried about what clothes you wear, don't be worried about where your food's coming from because the Most High has everything together. He takes care of the birds, He takes care of the grass, He takes care of the lilies. How much greater are you than all of them, right? And then He says in Matthew chapter 6, verse 33, seek ye first the kingdom of Elohim and all His right lawful standing, all His righteousness, and then all these things shall be added unto thee. And give no thought for the morrow shall take care of the things concerning itself, including the evil thereof. And then guess what it says in Matthew chapter 7, verse 1, because it would just continuously read through. The very next verse is where it says, give, and it shall be given unto thee. Judge the way you want to be judged, condemn the way you want to be condemned, forgive the way you want to be forgiven, and to whatever you give shall be given unto thee. Elohim's measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, shall men give into your bosom, for with the same measure that you meet shall it be given unto thee. And therefore, if you see somebody with chaff in their eye, don't concern about it, especially if you got a 2x4 hanging out of yours, right? A lot of persons don't put these verses together, right? Persons were worried about clothes, right? It is the Sermon on the Mount starts off in Matthew chapter 5, verse 3, we're blessed are the poor in spirit, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to them. Blessed are those that mourn, for they shall be comforted, right? Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth, right? Blessed are those when they revile you, rebuke you, and say all manner of evil against you falsely for Yahushua's name's sake. When they do that, rejoice and be exceeding glad. Why? Because they did the same thing to the prophet that came before you. After that, remember that you were the salt of the earth. You're a city that's placed on the hill. You are the light of the world. How is anything going to happen if the salt loses its savor? How you doing, Takwach? Shalom, by the way. Peace, everybody. Right? So, and all these different things, right? Like you are the light of the world. You are the salt of the earth. What's if it loses its savor? Then it talks about the law. Right? The next few verses after that, hey, make sure that you're into the law and you know the law greater than the scribes and the Pharisees. That anybody that's teaching and preaching and not living by the law, as far as the kingdom is concerned, they're the least. But those that live by it are considered to be the greatest. Then it starts saying, even if you have disputes in-house and your followers of the way, you walk in the same way, please don't let this thing play out to where there's got to be punishment. Make sure you come to an agreement as soon as possible, including in your marriages. That's Matthew 5:27-32. Make sure that you don't have false images of marriage, right? But don't come off with false images of marriage and things like that. Make sure that you're on track as far as what marriage is supposed to be, right? And don't get caught up in adultery and all this stuff. And even adultery, as far as the kingdom is concerned, where you're trying to serve two masters. You can't serve two. You'll love one and hate the other, right? But we have the law so we can be perfect as our Heavenly Father in heaven also is perfect. Right? Therefore, if you have an opportunity to give alms, but give alms because we're led to. And if you have an opportunity to pray to the Most High the way you're supposed to. And if you don't know how you're supposed to pray, it goes like this: Our Father who art in heaven, right? Put him in his actual place. Hallowed be his name. His name, his authority is set apart. His kingdom come. His will be done inside of earth the way that it is in heaven. And give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil, for thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. And then it reminds us in the next two verses 14 and 15 of Matthew chapter 6, it says, Be careful also not just about forgiving us of our debts, but be careful about those trespasses and the way that you might trespass against others or transgress. No, trespasses. Yeah, trespasses, where you cross the line. Know where the line is, know where the boundary is, and make sure you know you're aware of it. And if you start to get worried about, well, what if they'll take away this, or if I don't have my clothes, I got to clothe my family, we got to eat. And Yehoshua says, well, look, birds are taken care of, and they don't sow. You're greater than birds. You sow, right? You're supposed to keep and trust the earth. The bird is not on your level, but are they taken care of? Yes. The lily in the valley. Solomon, King Solomon, all of his splendor never looked as great as one of those lilies. Yet the Most High would dress and clothe you even more so. And then it says, after that, the grass is going to be cut the grass gets cut and gets burned. Yet Yah takes care and provides for the grass. How much more so will he provide for you who's supposed to be live life everlasting? Therefore, stop seeking the world and being afraid and thinking that, hey, if you worry and you're anxious or somebody says something that is going to add 1 cubit or one measurement of stature, is going to make you higher or taller, get you a promotion. It's not going to get you anything to worry except a heart attack. So seek ye first the kingdom of Elohim, Radach at Elohim, and all his right lawful standing to Sadaik, all his right lawful standing, his righteousness, and all these things that you're worried about, they're going to be added unto you anyways. Right? And give no thought for what's coming up in the morrow, for it's already taken care of, sufficient to even the evil that will show up. Right? And Yahweh's grace is sufficient. Yahweh's grace is sufficient. Right? Who the Most High is sufficient. So let that happen. And therefore, when you judge in the manner you want to be judged, condemn in the way you want to be condemned, forgive the way you want to be forgiven. For whatever you give, it shall be given unto thee. Elohim's measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, shall men given to your bosom, for with the same measure that you meet, shall it be given unto thee. Matthew chapter 7, verses 3 through 5. Even comes behind that. That's where we got the place where it starts talking about, make sure that before you talk about what's in somebody else's eye, that you deal with what's in your own eye. And usually when you can see all the stuff that's in somebody else, but don't take care of your own stuff, you got way more stuff clogging your vision than somebody else. Matthew chapter 7, verse 6, that's when we also realize in the midst of all this, this is not to be for everybody, because not everybody's going to get this. That's why we don't cast pearls before swine, because the swine is not conditioned to know how valuable a pearl is. So if you throw something at the swine, it won't be excited to do a pearl. It will look at the pearl, think that you tried to hit it, and will think that you tried to attack it. And when we give this word to persons, guess what? They're not going to listen to it. And they're not supposed to listen to it. They're not even supposed to really receive it. Why? Because they are swine. Swine are unclean. They are not lawful. They don't worry about what the word says. They eat things that nobody else can eat, and they have not been transformed yet to where the things that are in their stomach are things that shouldn't hurt them. The things that are in their stomach don't hurt them. Why? Because they're swine. Right? So therefore, in Matthew chapter 7, verse 12, that's why I give you the 4 golden rule. Do unto others as you want done unto you, for this is the law and the prophets. The law and the prophets is the standard, not CNN. The law and the prophets is the standard, not Fox News. Right? Or whatever else you watch. Right? I don't know all of them anymore. I don't care to know all of them anymore. But that's not the standard. Right? Therefore, once you finish that, Yehoshua closes out the Sermon on the Mount like this. He says, those who listen to this word, to the sermon that he gave, he said he will liken them, those who will adhere to it, not just hear it, but do the works as well. Not just be hearers, but be doers as well. Those who hear and do this, observe towards doing, right? He says that I will liken you to the wise man who built his house upon the foundation that we would call the rock, right? But he said for the foolish man who doesn't listen, he said, I will liken you to the man who built his house upon the sand. Now, if you don't get it, the rock and the sand is talking about like the hard rock or the hard surface of the earth, and then the sand is not the water, even though water comes into it. The problem with the sand is not that it cannot stand at all. The problem with the sand is that when the storm or the water shows up, it's not going to last. Right? So the rock is actual foundation that you should make sure that you're building on top of, right? But if you go a little further in here, and you get to the sand is the in-between place. Sand is a compound word. It's in between sea and land, right? The rock is 100% built on the solid land. It's not that people are trying to build their homes in the water. Persons who do that, it's not going to last at all. It's not even get started. The persons who try to build their house in the sand are the persons who are trying to go in between. They hokey pokey. One day you got your right foot in, and your right foot out. Next day it's your left foot in, and your left foot out, and then you're feeling kind of shaky, right? And the reality is that because you're trying, so what's happening tonight, a lot of persons, if you've never seen it, right? Probably everybody knows this, but just to make it clear, if it's on the sand, the water, the tide is going to come in during the nighttime. Even though we cannot see it, doesn't mean that it's not coming in. And the unseen tide will mess up anything you're trying to build. If you wrote your name in the sand, probably not going to be there when you get back tomorrow. That water has anything to do with it, right? Especially when the tide rises. So you build your house upon the rock, because the rock is solid. If you build your house upon the sand is solid enough for you to get some of the building done and maybe even last through some things, but especially when that storm comes or if that tide becomes enough or the flood becomes enough, it's not going to last. And so build your foundation on the truth. Build your foundation on the place to where freedom actually is, where the liberty actually is, where the truth, the way the truth and the life actually are, and where the freedom in saying Yah's word is actually rewarded by the Most High Himself. Stop trying to be in a fallible place where you're looking for the rewards of the world. You'll never be able to get what Yahweh has for you if you keep looking for that. Amen? All right. Tada, my Shabbat. Thank you, family. I appreciate you. I shall see you guys tomorrow, 8 a.m. New York time. And we'll go ahead and we'll have our live session. Prayerfully, you guys enjoyed today. Thank you. And I look forward to speaking with you guys very soon. And we give Yahweh Elohim all glory, majesty, dominion, and power, both now and forever. We're thankful unto Him for my wife, the Honorable Alma. Thank you to the moderators, ministerial staff, SOC, Lottie Dottie, and everybody. October 1st, which is going to be Wednesday or Wednesday. That'll be the Day of Atonement. So those of you who are going to join us in Atlanta, Georgia, or those of you who are going to join us virtually, we look forward to that. Ministerial staff, you should have your assignments already. There's a couple persons besides ministerial staff I'm going to reach out to see if we can get you to help out with some things. But we appreciate you. So, Achaba, SOC, love you, family. We thank you so much. Don't forget, we are supposed to serve, right? Our scripture that we get the name from, Ephesians chapter 6, verse 6, tells us that once we have our marriages strong, and we make sure that we're looking to Yah for everything, that we're teaching our children correctly, and we're making sure that we put on the full armor and all those things, that we are the servants of Christ. And so we thank you for serving Him with us. Thank you again to everybody. Hopefully this word blessed you in some way, shape, or form, regardless of whether you're watching it live or watching it later on. And hopefully you guys continue to do great, marvelous, majestic, and mighty things. So until I have a chance to speak before you again, remember as always, beloved, that you are loved, you are necessary, you are majestic, you are fearfully and wonderfully made, and you, which is all of us working together, you'll be the reason why people who are in this system no longer have to be of it. Shalom, family. Take care. We'll see you for Q&A tomorrow. Peace and blessings. Barakat Shalom.